Sometimes you just have a brain fart. I don't know what happens out there. Ultimately, the forcing function is when I heard Michael Gerber speak at age 70, and I realized, I called my wife immediately. I said, hon, I can still be doing this at 70. And so I said, look, let's take a year and go around the world. And we ended up in Barcelona, and it forced me then to hire people to run our various divisions. And the rest is history. But it's always been about what is the constraint at this moment? And that's where you need to direct your efforts. And by the way, often who will help you fix that constraint is the right who, built around owning the two words in the marketplace that will build your brand. And so what's that? Take a moment. What is in your way? What decision? We had to hire a chief marketing officer in the first quarter of this year, and we got it done. It's been unbelievably freeing and liberating. Take a moment. What's the constraint? Write it down. What's in your way? What's keeping you from taking the next step? Do the work. Do the work. Could be time. Absolutely. All right, turn next to somebody and share it. Go. All right, let me welcome you back. And so, here's the way I want you to think about it. I want you to line up all the things that you think you've got to get done. And then your job's to find the front domino. And the only way I know to do that is to find sufficient time to think and learn in order to give you the insights necessary to find that front domino. Now, once you find it, here's the routine that's critical. You must absolutely carve that kind of time aside every day or every other day in order to make it happen. When Steve Jobs realized the next constraint was retail, that nobody could retail his products like he could, he said, we got to get in the retail business. Just like he figured out iTunes was the real constraint. He needs to control the distribution of music. And a hardware manufacturer to go that direction and then go to retail was crazy. But it was all driven around a very, very simple decision. Where's the constraint? So then he set up a mock retail store, and for 3 hours every day, except Monday, their executive team meetings, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and most Sundays, dragging his friend Larry Ellison over there on the weekends. In 6 months, when they launched, everybody was just blown away that they'd created the largest, most successful retail store on the planet. It doesn't happen by accident. We know, as John Grisham said, hey, you want to be a great writer? Look, from 5 to 7, he had a day job. He had to get there to court by 9 o'clock. I'd get up and I would spend the time. It was a habit. It became part of my daily routine. And so, once you figure out that not having a book is the constraint or whatever it might be, for you then to not carve out that time and have the discipline to stay focused on solving the constraint, as Mark Zuckerberg did and all the others I've shared, it's not going to happen. Now, let's get to cash. So how do we convert this all into cash? How are we going to make literally a ton of money legitimately out there, all right? And by the way, I'm from Colorado, so we got a lot of other opportunities now. If you want to make a ton of money, here is the ultimate truth. You have to give away 200 pounds. So I want to tell you a story. I launched Gazelles in 1996 on the eve of the birth of our first son, Cameron. And it was a great ride. We took it from $500,000 to $1 million to $2 million to $4 million, getting ready to go to $8 million. I'm going to be an Inc. 500 company. And then 9/11 hit, and it slapped us silly. And I literally lost $1 million in 8 weeks. We almost lost our home. I had to let all the team go just before Thanksgiving. My only positive was, well, now you at least have the holiday month off. You know, you try to generate whatever positivity you can. And it just so happened, Richard Kiyosaki came to town, and he came to speak to our EO chapter. And I read his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and at the very end of it, he said, one of the things that his rich fathers do whenever they get in trouble is they got to get money flowing again. And so they've got to give it away first before it'll come to them. Now, as crazy luck would have it, our church was having a massive campaign. Now, I was always good. I'd put a little bit of money in the till every week, but honestly, it wasn't anything to write home about. And I came home to Julie, and I'm telling you, we are in trouble. But I said, look, I trust this universal truth. And we committed to donate over the next 36 months the largest chunk of change I had ever even conceived I would give away. And you know what? It worked. And it was crazy. What I'd actually committed to give away in 2002, I ended up taking to the bottom line 10 times that. Now, let me see how it plays out in a simpler way. I don't know about you guys, but haven't you noticed how important it is to leave a tip in your hotel room as a speaker? And I've seen it happen that when I properly over tip the folks in the hotel and the folks that are taking care of us, great things happen. So it starts there. Now, I want to give you a couple of resources. Adam Grant, I think, has really helped us figure out how to do this give and take thing properly. A book that changed my life around money was Lynn Twist's book called The Soul of Money, which means the only way to get more flowing in is you got to keep it flowing out on the other side. But it was ultimately this guy, John Whitehead. So John, who recently passed away at age 92 in February, was the co-chair of Goldman Sachs. He was then brought in as the Deputy Secretary of State for our country. And then most recently, he was the one who chaired the rebuilding of Lower Manhattan after 9/11. And I had a chance to serve on a board for many, many years with John, an organization called NIFTY, where we taught inner city youth entrepreneurship, one of my passions and charities. And at one of the board meetings, I pulled John aside and said, John, what have you learned in life? And he thought about it, and then he said, you know what, to always do a little bit of retail business every day. And he said, let me explain that. He said, as co-chairman of Goldman Sachs, you got the big office and all that stuff, but I always made sure I went down to the trading floor to see if there was somebody, one of our new employees, that could use some help. When I became Deputy Secretary of State, I told my staff that as busy as I was, bring me one person every day who was in trouble, a couple who had lost their passports in Paraguay and just needed somebody in government to pull a string and help them. And I realized that at the end of the day, the most important thing all of us can do, and it's crazy how people come into our worlds on a daily basis. I get these strange emails. Hey, Verne, we love what you're doing. I really need some help. And look, I'm busy. But one of the most important routines, at least for me over the last decade, was to make sure I carve out 30 minutes to 45 minutes every day and go help somebody who's asked for help. And that, because ultimately, it only comes when you give first. And so, let me wrap up here. What are these ideas that I think we need to focus on? And then I'm going to give you one last one. First, who's the top 25 that's going to help you scale up the business? Number 2, what are those 2 words or a few words, the idea, the space that you can absolutely own? Number 3, then, as you're trying to scale up, it's always focusing your effort where the constraint is. And then the ultimate lesson around cash is, man, you got to give it before it comes. You got to give before you take. Now, we talked about the critical routine of learning, but I want to share just one last one. And this comes from Marshall Goldsmith. And I got to tell you, this has transformed me and my team and our clients more than any other idea I can share with you. And And that was important, so you cannot do this thing alone, that you need what he calls a peer coach, not a mentor. I got all kinds of mentors and always have been privileged and blessed to have that. But this is someone different. This is a peer. This is my friend Sebastian Ross, who ultimately, it comes down, if you want to be a better father, better husband, and a better leader of your business, it comes down to what you're going to do more or less of on a daily basis. And so we got a tool in our book called the One-Page Personal Plan. And I remember one year my focus was my youngest son, Quinn. He wasn't getting enough attention. And I'd learned from Dan and Chip Heath that if I would just play with him every night I was there the way he wanted to play. Let him build the Thomas the Train track the way he wanted to, not me. Play chess the way he wanted to, not me. And so I added it to my list, and every night I had to report to my peer coach, Sebastian, did I do it or not? Did I do my Tabata exercise? Did I do my meditation every day? And when I put my business one-page plan, when I launched the book, I put together a list of influencers, but I had to make sure that every day I reached out to one of those influencers. And I had to report to Sebastian whether I did it or not. And so, real quick, write down on a piece of paper, who could be your peer coach? And you can look up Marshall, he talks about it. I then meet with Sebastian once a week, and he's the guy that has my back. And so if you want to scale, it takes this: passion, purpose, and persistence. I didn't tell you the whole story. The real influence for me was my father. He was a rocket scientist in Martin Marietta in Littleton, Colorado. He and a bunch of the group of guys, in fact, I remember back in 1965, he brings home one of the very first calculators that had been created with those old glowing tubes. They then launched a company called Higher Electronics, and they became huge. And we were living the life. We had the homes and the boats and all of that stuff. And then in 1973, in the recession, they lost it. And we went from being really, really wealthy to dirt poor. Because Dad didn't want to declare bankruptcy. He put the very, very last piece. We sold everything we had to try to save the company. And in 2 wheat trucks that we borrowed from my grandfather on my 15th birthday, we moved from this oasis to Kinsley, Kansas, about 35 miles this side of Dodge. And he and I became janitors. I cleaned every night after school, 100 restrooms and a couple hundred nursing home rooms, $2.22. By the way I got to work is I bought my first car, a Camaro, for $50. The reason I got it so cheap, it had been hit by a train, but no problem. You know, it got me there. And it ultimately destroyed my father. He became an alcoholic. I remember the tough decision my sisters and I had to make to actually have him put in jail because we were worried that he might kill somebody out on the roads. And he never really, really forgave us for that. And I swore at that moment that I would dedicate my life to having and helping every entrepreneur I could avoid that painful experience. And you got to imagine when my company bit the bullet in 2001, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, deja vu. And so this is a very personal thing for me to be able to help every one of you. And I hope it's an invitation for you to email me. And if you need some help, I will take the time to do that. And so at the end of the day, to keep scaling, it requires these 3 things. NSA, thank you so much. Now, we have a core value, practice what we preach. And so if you want to make a ton of money, you got to give away 200 pounds. If you want to make 10 tons of money, you got to give away what? A ton. And so there are 1,700 of my books back there, 2,080 pounds precisely. Please take one. I'll be out there at the breaks to sign them. You guys, good luck. Thank you so much.